I know you also wrote a book about marriage. Is that right? So
Yes.
we can cover everything today. If we jump to that, you want to tell us how to help our marriages.
Yeah.
What's a good way to communicate with your spouse?
We have a long list of questions.
Yeah.
Communication. No,
The book is Common Ground, and kind of the big theme, what happened as I was working with couples, over decades, and really watching people who really loved one another and were trying. Like, these are people, a lot of the people I were working with were married as believers, caring about their marriage, knowing they weren't going to get divorced, and really doing the hard work of marriage, and still really experiencing a lot of division that they were blaming on themselves or blaming on each other.
Yeah.
And so really what the book is to uncover, in essence, how the world and the flesh, the two things that we oppose, and the enemy, and how they get us lost in ourselves and blaming on one another. So it's really how to undo the subtle kind of lies of evil in your marriage. And I deal with the New Testament commands to the husband and wife are actually different, all right?
Yeah.
And that's because I think we're made differently, and in our being, in our ontology, we want different things. Now, we're living in a culture where that's not a super popular thing to talk about, but I think when we understand kind of the big things that are operating behind our communication, then we do a better job communicating. I'll just give you one example. I talk about the physical differential. In 1 Peter 3, it says to the husband, keep treating your wife with understanding as with a weaker vessel, which simply means physically weaker. And then it says, if you do not treat her the way you should, your prayers will not be heard. Now, as women, you both know what it's like to be a woman in this world and be physically weaker. Like, I don't have to ask you which gender growing up got more inappropriate touches and comments, right?
Right.
We know the answer to that. And so if a husband is sensitive to the physical differential and the vulnerability a woman feels, then he tries to treat her with understanding, and that actually pushes evil away. Okay, if you do not treat her the way you should, your prayers will not be heard. And part of what I get into the book is I actually believe the scriptures teach in the context of marriage, over the marital relationship, the wife will get beat up a little bit more about what's going on because she's more vulnerable. If you look at the Genesis passage, okay, who was tempted? Eve. Okay, she eats the fruit. And it says she turns and gives it to her husband who was there with her. All right? And it's when he eats it that together they realize they're naked and ashamed. All right? So to some degree, they just weren't working together. But what Adam wasn't doing was treating his wife with understanding, remembering what God said, stepping in, being involved. And so the New Testament commands to the husband, all three, keep treating your wife with understanding, the one I already quoted from 1 Peter 3. Ephesians 4 or 5, I forget, sacrifice for your wife, and then Colossians 3, love your wife and don't be embittered. All three of them say to husbands, you have a little bit more to give your wife. And what I see husbands is passivity in their marital relationships. So oftentimes I'll say, I'll say to a couple, let's say you're going through something a little where there's some tension, and on a scale of 1 to 10, oftentimes the wife will feel a little bit more fear about it. So to her, it feels like a 7 or 8. To the husband, it feels like a 5. So he thinks, if I move up and say it's a 7 or 8, she's going to go to a 10. So he says it's a 4. So then she says it's a 12. Then he says it's a 0, and and they're arguing over the intensity.
Yeah.
And so I say, husband, move up and just say, it must be hard to experience it that way.
Yeah.
Then she comes down.
Right.
Because he's treating her with understanding.
Yeah.
So that's kind of that's a big idea, just a physical differential, how that comes into play in communication. That's some of the stuff I deal with in the book.
That's really good.
Wow, that's crazy. Yes, because I can definitely see that in my own house. I'm but sometimes I'm the one that goes down really low, and my husband's the one that goes up really high. But maybe if I'm met more in the middle, but I'm always afraid to go up because then I'm like, oh, if I go up, then he's gonna skyrocket off.
That's right. That's right.
Trying to keep it, level.
Yeah.
But I didn't think of it that way of that it would maybe ease his burden if I did come up and legitimize his fears.
Yeah. We really don't all of us don't do what the scriptures teach us, right? We're called to help each other with their issues, not solve them.
Oh, right.
Or resent them. Like it's really easy as a spouse to resent that your spouse struggles.
Yeah.
And not want to help them with that.
Yeah.
So,
like, just get over it.
Yeah,
You'll be fine.
yeah.
Shake it off. Come on. Let's keep moving. Like, you're fine. Yeah. That's my mother-in-law laughs all the time because when my kids fall or when they were really little, they would fall and be like, oh, you're fine. Be fine. Come on.
Yeah.
Like, just keep moving. So I don't have a lot of empathy. I'm definitely not great on that. So I'm going to get better. Yeah. But I mean, it is. You do need to be able to help them. You're great at that. I mean,